I wanted to start today by first saying that I'm sorry if God was ever presented wrongly to any of you growing up. When we hear things growing up, we believe those 100%, and sometimes we're sold the bill of goods that once you become a Christian, nothing wrong's going to ever happen to you. Once you become a Christian, you'll always be protected no matter what. Once you become a Christian, it will be nothing but blessings and flowers and cupcakes. And that's not true. And I know some of you have been greatly hurt thinking, where was God? Why did this happen? Why didn't this happen? Who is this God? If he's filled with love, then why is there so much evil? Well, the answer to that question is it's because we live in a world that's filled with sin. So here's what's the difference. So you think, so then why become a Christian, right? If it's not going to protect me from everything, if I'm not going to be constantly blessed, why become a Christian? Well, you become a Christian because no longer do you have to walk that road on your own. When things happen in your life because of sin of somebody else, God didn't condone that. God didn't want that. That wasn't God's will. But he allows free choice in this world. And so when things happen that rock our world and make us angry and break our hearts, the difference is God says, I know this is a mess. But if you come to me, I'm going to make something out of that mess that's not only going to help you, it's going to help others along the road. And the more that we do that, rather than becoming bitter, the more that we will lean towards God, the more we can make that world a better place to live in. It's a win-win situation. So if you've tried making it on your own, and it may look okay in the bank account, but not emotionally, you're empty. You're filled with anger, you're filled with disgust. Then maybe it's time to give him a try. Lay it in his hands. Help him tell you which roads to take and what decisions to make, because he saw the end from the very beginning, and you were made and created especially for this time. The thing that I want to talk about today is it's called a place of preparation. And we were created in God's image, and God wanted us to learn and to grow and to invent things. And so he gave us this curiosity. If anybody's had children, and as they get toddler age, one of the hardest stages to go through is the why stage. Everything is a why. And after a while, you kind of get tired, and you finally go, I don't know, but we're going to find out. Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why did you say that? Why can't I do this? Why does the bird fly? Why does the fish swim? But that's how God made us, so that we would be curious about life, that we would have questions. And by having those questions, we can solve problems. By questioning, we can learn to grow, have solutions, invent things, knowledge. And we question a lot of people. We question at school, we question our friends, we question our coworkers, our children. We're filled with questions. And those questions don't just stop here. Sometimes your questions are towards God. Haven't you asked him questions? I have. I've said, why, God? I said, where are you, God? I said, why not now, God? I've even said at times when I was angry, how could you, God? Because we don't see the full picture. We see moments in time. And sometimes in our life, what feels like a punishment is actually preparing us for what God has called us to do. I've mentioned before that there was times in my life, especially in the ministry area, where I was talked about, I was lied upon, I was betrayed, my feelings were hurt, I felt cast out. At that time, that seemed like a punishment. At times, I would say things like, God, I'm doing your will and I'm trying to do the best, and people are believing lies. In fact, they're spreading lies. God, I'm trying to do what you want me to do, but there's so many obstacles. I thought that was punishment. Why would you let this happen, God? Looking back on it now, that was preparation. I've mentioned before, how bad would it be if you had a pastor that had a really thin skin, that the first time my feelings got hurt, I had to shout from the pulpit and try to cast a person out. That's not a good leader. So God sometimes allows things to happen, often allows things to happen so that you can toughen up a little bit. So that the first obstacle that comes your way, you don't duck and cover. When you're hurt badly in different areas, when you go through that, you really don't take offense after a while. You're like, well, God knows the truth. I don't have to prove myself to anybody. I have to prove myself to Him. See, but I wouldn't have got to that place had I the first heartache, the first hurt, got angry, thrown in the towel, and walked away. That preparation wouldn't have prepared me for what God had called me to do. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, about how God will prepare us for exactly where He's called us to be. All through the Bible, the people that God used the most had moments in their life when they questioned, when they didn't understand, when they doubted, and even struggled with what God told them to do. But the cool thing is since we have the Bible, we can read the rest of the story. We know how it ends up. When I'm reading the Bible, at times, reading through the Bible, I will want to even tell certain people, hey, don't worry. It's going to turn out really cool. It's going to be just fine. I've read this before, because I try to immerse myself in the story with them. I want to say the same thing to you. If you stay with God, don't worry. It's going to turn out just fine. What they considered a punishment at times was actually preparation. Kind of reminds me of the movie. They did a remake, so if you're not old enough for the original, maybe you heard of the remake, The Karate Kid. If you've seen that movie, a kid moves to a new town, he gets kind of pushed around a lot. He gets bullied. He has a neighbor that knows how to teach the art of defense. He becomes friends with that neighbor, and he asks him, hey, would you show me how to defend myself? He says yes. He decides to take him for a student. When he shows up ready to learn how to slap somebody up with the head, that's not what he's greeted with. He's greeted with a sponge and a bucket of water. And he wants him to wash the deck. Really? I thought you were going to teach me how to fight. Don't ask any questions. Just obey. He washes the deck. He's like, okay, surely tomorrow comes, he waxes the car. There's certain movements that he tells him to do, and if he's not waxing it correctly, he'll tell him the correct moves to do. And in his mind, I'm sure he's thinking, did he just want to get free work done? Or is he really going to help me? It doesn't make any sense. He's angry, he's hot, he's sweaty, and now he's having to work. This is punishment. I could have just stayed home. I haven't learned anything. God's not doing anything in my life. Not at all. This is wrong. My heart hurts. Why am I being punished this way? Well, just like the kid in the movie, when it came time to defend himself, those same movements that he used, the wax on, the wax off, the scrubbing of the floors, he would shout that to him. He would do that technique. He didn't know at that time that he was being taught how to defend himself, so much so that he reached his destiny of becoming a champion. But it seemed like punishment back then. It didn't make any sense. God does the same thing in our life. If we don't throw in the towel, if we don't shake our fist at Him and walk away, if we'll lean into Him, then He'll take you wonderful places. You'll look back at your life and you'll go, oh, this makes so much sense now. I get it. I get why He allowed this to happen. I get I get the reasons now. And so we're going to talk about one in particular, and we're going to see what we can learn from his story in the Bible. There's a lot of different characters where he seems to isolate. And I want you to know that in your journey as a Christian, there's going to be mountaintops, man, when the world looks good. And there's going to be valleys. There's going to be blessings. There's going to be lessons. There'll be questions, and there will even be tests. And there's going to be promotions. That's why it's so important that a believer has faith in God. Because otherwise you think you're just getting kicked around. But if you know who your Heavenly Father is, and you know that you can stake your life on the Bible verse that says that He'll work out all things for your good. It doesn't mean that all things are good, but what He means is if you give it to me, I'm going to make something good out of it. You're never too much of a failure, and you're never too far away. God will always use you. God will always wrap His arms around you, and He'll say, we'll do this together. We'll work through this together. I can redeem what seemed like such a mess. God isolated so many people in the time of preparation. And sometimes it seems like it's a quiet, lonely place because God has to kind of get you away sometimes. God had David be a shepherd while watching his flocks alone in the wilderness to prepare him for the days ahead. God isolated Moses in the desert for 40 years to prepare him for his future ministry, which was to lead people to freedom. God prepared Jesus for 40 days in the wilderness to be tempted by Satan before he began his public ministry. The character we're going to talk about today is a man named Elijah. And part of his story is found in 1 Kings chapter 17. And what he does with Elijah is he sends him to a lonely, quiet place. It seems to be a place of desperation and discouragement, but it's not. So here we go. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1 through 7. And Elijah the Tishbite, meaning he came from a place called Tisha, of the inhabitants of Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years except at my word. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Elijah, saying, get away from here, turn eastward, hide by the brook of Cherith, which flows into the Jordan. And it will be that you shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, for he stayed by the brook of Cherith, which flows into the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. And it happened after a while that the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. To give you a little bit of a background, by this time there had been 200 years of evil queens and kings ruling the people. They had turned their back on God. They sacrificed their children. They prayed to the idols. They did all kinds of unspeakable acts. And if there was going to be a trophy for the most wicked, it was Ahab and Jezebel. And that's where we find our story today, is with Ahab and Jezebel in power. And God has finally told Elijah, go and tell them no more rain until they change their ways. That wouldn't be like such a big deal to us, but it was a really big deal back then. No rain, no food, death. No rain, no livestock, death. But he takes Elijah and he tells him, but don't hang out here. I want you to go to a place that I prepared for you. Now that might seem like punishment, because he didn't say go back to your home, did he? Back to your home where your family is, back to your home where you're comfortable. No, he still wanted him in the vicinity where there was going to be no rainfall, But he says, I prepared a place for you. I prepared a place for you, and this is going to take complete trust on Elijah's part. Because the birds are what brought him meat to eat and bread. I don't know where they scavenged it from. I don't know if God just poof and there it was. I don't know if they stole it from places. I don't know what the situation was, but he didn't go hungry. But he was alone, isolated. He could have thought, why are you punishing me like this? I have a home. I could just go to that. I can just go to that and pray, right? But God needed him alone to prepare him. He wanted him to completely trust in him. Sometimes a whole rug is taken out underneath our feet. Everything that we built our life on crumbles and falls away because sometimes God has to get us to that place where we trust on him and not ourselves. Sometimes he has to get us to that place alone when we can finally have a conversation with him. And he can mold us into who he's calling us to be. When God prepares us and he molds us, it's not painless. I wished I could say it was. In fact, it can be heartbreaking even. Sometimes it's the breaking that makes us whole. When God prepares us, he's working on our character so that when we're ready, he's ready to use us, we can handle the responsibility. Have you ever worked for somebody who was just power hungry? Not a good boss. Have you ever had to sit underneath somebody or a teacher that was just full of theirself? They didn't make it easy. You didn't feel like you were doing teamwork. They didn't handle that power and that responsibility well. And so God, as Christians, wants to prepare us so that when it's time to raise us to a different level, we don't cause other people to stumble, that we don't hurt them, we actually will help them. So when God calls us away, he's working on our character. Sad to say, but it's true. God cares a whole lot more about our character than our comfort. So if you're uncomfortable, join the crowd. God's trying to help you be the best you that you can possibly be. Why? Because we have to stay in this world, and I want to make this world the best that it can possibly be. He molds us and he shapes us. In fact, he uses an example one time in the Bible. He has the gentleman that he's talking to go to a potter, and watch him with a piece of clay. And he says, I'm molding you and I'm making you and I'm shaping you, just like the potter shapes the clay. The clay doesn't get to sit on the shelf and go, nope, I'm just going to be a bowl. All I'm going to be. The potter's the one that decides the shape. And if you've ever done pottery or watched pottery, it looks kind of brutal. When you first get that clay, it's hard. And you have to knead it and punch it and pull on it and pull on it. And the heat, you apply the heat of your hands, and eventually that gets to where you can mold it a little bit. You been there? Felt a little heat, a little push, a little pull. Then if that's not enough, then you think, okay, we're ready now, right? Make me into something. No, they take you over to the wheel, and they don't gently place you on the wheel. You seen it? You take it. You put some water on there, and you slap it. I loved that part in art class. Loved it. I would mess up on purpose just so I could slap it again and watch that water just spurt. So then you slap it, and then you start molding it again. And you push it, and you pull, and you push, and you pull, and you squeeze. And if it doesn't work out just right, you don't just gently start molding again. You pull it off, and you slap it again. Eventually, it will become what it was destined to be. So God's saying, I'm the one. You don't call the shots. I'm the one, because see, I created you. I'm invested in you. And when I created you, I had an assignment for you. And I'm going to keep molding and pushing and molding and pushing so that I can use you. But how wonderful it is if you've ever gone to a pottery shop and seen the beautiful pieces. Here's the thing. You think you're doing pretty well. Look at me, I'm a great bowl now. This is good. We're done, right? Gently they pick you up because they don't want to mess it up. And they crank up the heat. And then they place it inside an oven where if you could, it would scream because it's so hot. See, that he's purifying you. But then when he takes you out and he puts that glaze on you, and you're that one of a kind, you're in a place where you're displayed and you're beautiful because you'll be able to be used for the thing that you were created for. So I don't know what stage you're in. Maybe you're still in that crusty, hard stage where you've been sitting on the shelf for so long. Maybe you've got to the warmed up stage, and maybe he's just splat you all over the place. I don't know where you are, but I want you to know that whatever stage you're in, if you'll lean on him, it's that place of preparation. He'll be able to use you for what you were destined to be used for. Because here's the cool thing, doesn't everybody love a hero? Don't you like being the hero of your own story? Do you know that if you stay with God in this place of preparation, that you can be the sole person that will break a curse in your family and set them free? Do you know that if you stay with him, that you can say a prayer and somebody across the world can be healed because you prayed? Don't you want to have a legacy like that? When we pass away, they're going to talk about all the things that we were. They're going to talk about our character. They're not going to talk so much about our material possessions that we had. They're going to talk about our character. What do you want them to say when you pass away? What legacy do we want to have? I want to have a legacy that says that she was used by God. Because see, whatever I do in my life, it affects my children, my grandchildren. It affects my friends. I want to be able for them to look towards me and go, I want to do the same thing. And you have a chance to do that. You have people that are watching you, that are depending on you. You can make the world better for them, or you can make it a nightmare. That's a lot of power. Let's do better. That's what I want in my life, is I want to do better. So how are we going to learn from Elijah? Elijah does a great work in God does a great work in Elijah, but before he does this great work through him, he has to do a great work in him. God wants Elijah to rely on him, not himself. Why? Because the Bible says that God gives favor and grace to the humble. If you can do it yourself, you don't need nobody. I got this. God can't really work with you, and he can't really bless you. Because see, you're depending only on yourself. But when you humble yourself and you say, God, I need your help. I need to know what to do with this situation. Then God can start working with you, and he can start giving you favor. In Elijah's story, it said after a while that the brook dried up and there was no rain, no water. So God had been taking care of Elijah. He told him to go there, but now Elijah has nothing. It's a do or die situation now. Now he's desperate. He's like, but God, here's where you told me to go. This is what you told me to do. And then now, it's looking really bad. You can be in the middle of God's will and be in a storm. You can be in the middle of God's will and be in a desperate situation. Why? Because he's still wanting you to trust and to lean on him. So then God humbles Elijah privately to prepare him publicly. He needs to hear and listen and obey God, or he will not survive. It's desperate. We find out in those times that God is all we need, and if we have God, we have everything that we need. So many people will put their hope and trust in many different things, and because God loves us, there may be times when he strips it all away so that we will rely only on him. You might be in a place of pain right now, feeling like you're being punished, but something bigger is going on. God is preparing you. Is it painful? Yeah, probably. Do you wish it didn't happen? Yeah, probably. But what you choose to do with it and how you choose to view it, that's what matters. What do I do with this situation? The answer is to trust God with your life and your heart so that you can grow through what you're going through. God taught Elijah humility and total dependency on him. Then God tells him, it's time to move. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to a house, and in that house is a widow. And she has a son. And you're going to ask him for something to eat. What Elijah didn't know is when he's going to ask her for something to eat, that's all she had was just a little bit. Just enough for her belly and her son's belly. And then they were going to starve. God didn't want Elijah to bring her food. That's kind of odd, isn't it? Somebody starving, that's all they've got. And you as a believer said, God, why don't I give them something? You had the birds bring me bread and meat. Can't they bring me a good loaf and I can take this to the widow? But that's not what God planned. So Elijah asked the widow for something to eat. I don't know what made the widow decide. Maybe she felt the presence of God. Maybe she thought, well, what does it matter anyway? We're going to be dead in a few minutes here. And so she does. Often God will ask us to give up what seems like everything, even though it's just little, so that he can use it and multiply it and bless it. I like that this story had a happy ending because when she did that, then until the rains came, the flour never went away. The water never, and the oil never dried up in her household. She had plenty, and she had plenty to share. Because one person didn't question and went, okay, God. God will use you even in desperate situations to inspire somebody else so that God can bless them. So their story isn't completely over at this time. You would think, well, that's good. It all ended happy. But then what happens is later on, her son dies. And of course, she's heartbroken. And she asks for Elijah. What's really great is she noticed that Elijah was a man of God, and Elijah comes to the house and he prays over the child, and that's the first resurrection in the Bible that's taken place. Now, Elijah is now noticed by a whole lot of people. Because if you know women and they get excited, you can hear them for a while, and they're going to tell everybody, my son was dead, my son was dead. Remember I told you my son was dead, and now he's alive because of this man of God, Elijah. I love the part that at the beginning it said that Elijah was a Tishbite. But at the end of this, now it says he's a man of God that speaks truth. That's what God was preparing him for, was to be called a man of God. People will notice the change in you when you allow God to work his plans in you. God changed Elijah's identity. You don't like what you think about yourself, what you've been labeled by other people? Give yourself to God, and God will change your identity. How do I know that? I know that because it's happened to me, but I know it because in the Bible, he says that the old man is cast away and he makes a new creation. He makes a new creature when you come into his family. Isn't that great? You don't have to carry the baggages of yesterday. You no longer have to be known as that person. Now you have a new identity as a child of God. Elijah is now called a man of God. Why? Because he let the potter mold the clay. Elijah depended totally on God and he obeyed. When we get to that point, when we can say, God, I say yes to whatever you tell me to do. God, it's not about me. It's about you. And whatever you do and want me to do, I will do. What is God asking of you today? What is he teaching you? See, if we trust him, then we can realize that our time of desperation is not a punishment, but it's a preparation for who he's calling you to be. He's called all of us to be great in our own way. And if you're tired of carrying the burdens of yesterday, if you're tired of just life the way it is, if you're tired of struggling trying to make ends meet, if you're tired of always being angry, then maybe this is a great day to just lay it at his feet. The altar is always open here, but you don't even have to come to the altar. He'll meet you right where you are. And you don't even have to close your eyes if you don't want to. I have ADD, so it's best if I close my eyes, because I'm going to see something and I'm going to forget I was even praying, to be real honest. But you can sit right where you are, and you just say, I don't know how to do this. I don't have all the answers, but I want to lean on the one that does have all the answers. The closing song is that he can take what's broken and he can make it whole again. That he can take what was old and he can make it new. So if you'd like a new start today, a new identity, he's waiting with his arms open. God bless you.